And it's interesting because everybody's throwing around this access to justice mission now. But many of the business models out there are misaligned to that because the business models of those companies have to do with charging lawyers more and more money. How are the lawyers going to pay more and more money to vendors and software companies other than charging the end user, the client, more and more money?
Today on LawNext, a conversation with Charley Moore, the founder and CEO of the legal services company Rocket Lawyer, which recently became the first national company approved to participate in the Utah Regulatory Sandbox, a pilot program for licensing new and alternative forms of legal providers and services. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to LawNext, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. We'll get to today's interview in just a moment. But first, let's hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. ASG Legal Tech, a platform of 4 leading software products: Practice Panther, Bill for Time, Mariscase, and HeadNote. ASG Legal Tech offers a suite of software that allows lawyers to automate the management side of their firm so they can focus on practicing law. Now on to my conversation with Charley Moore. Charley Moore, thank you for joining us today.
Bob, thanks for having me. It's great to talk to you again, and I'm glad that you're healthy and well.
Well, I am, and I hope you are too. What has this been like for your company to go through the last 6 months or so?
Yeah, well, COVID's not good for anybody. This has been a really challenging environment for our team, to work in, and many of our customers are in distress, and we know it, and we've worked hard to help to alleviate some of their distress. We have lots of small business customers that have been affected by the pandemic, that have been affected by the social justice issues that are at the top of a lot of people's minds, and individuals and families as well. Millions of them, and we know their stories. And so we pivoted pretty quickly in March and spent several weeks really rallying and focused on what could we do about the distress brought on by the pandemic. And I couldn't have been prouder of our team. We created a coronavirus legal center that went online. People worked around the clock, literally in the wee hours, at the same time that, of course, our entire operation was moving from offices in San Francisco and Utah and other places to everybody working from home. And at the same time, we've sort of furiously worked to build a resource called the Coronavirus Legal Center for small businesses that were at that time looking for government relief in the CARES Act, and companies that were furloughing people who were being furloughed and were looking for unemployment benefits in record numbers, et cetera. And we did that, and in some ways it made us feel really, really good. Kind of took our minds off our own problems by focusing on that big need that businesses and consumers had out there for information and access to attorneys. And so attorneys in our network volunteered to answer questions for free through that Coronavirus Legal Center. So I think the first thing I'd say about the pandemic is it was really a call to action that I couldn't be prouder of our team for answering. And then as things have gone on, people have continued to need that resource. We've partnered with companies like Staples to do webinars and to provide tools for small businesses. We partnered with GoDaddy as well, and we're proud of that. But our business has actually done quite well this year. And I think the pandemic has accelerated the transition to natively digital legal tools, and that's what Rocket Lawyer was founded to deliver. And the pandemic accelerated that. And so tools like Rocket Sign, our digital signature solution, our digital legal documents that sort of our core business. And importantly, and I know you want to talk about the Utah sandbox, our on-call attorney network has never been busier because they have the tools, and those attorneys all over the U.S. and in the U.K. and in Europe are really capable of practicing in a natively digital way, and have been doing so for years. And now that's effectively the only way that people can get legal services is digitally in some way. So the pandemic really accelerated the adoption of the Rocket Lawyer platform and the natively digital tools that we I think pioneered.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about the Utah sandbox, but given the point you were just making about pioneering the delivery of legal services online, I wonder if we could just kind of step back a little bit and just talk about the founding of this company and what you referred to about the original vision for Rocket Lawyer and the fact that you helped pioneer legal services online. So I wonder if you could talk about what your background was before starting Rocket Lawyer in 2008 and what your original vision was for the company.
Well, thanks, Bob. And it's been a labor of love, of course, joined on the journey by, hundreds and if not at this point, thousands of other people, employees, partners, et cetera. The original notion for Rocket Lawyer, grew out of how I grew up. I grew up, working in a small business in a chain of gas stations in Missouri, and I saw
your father owned gas stations, right? Is that...
Yeah, and I saw how great legal advice or bad legal advice could make or break our business back then. And once I became a lawyer, it really crystallized for me because I think this is part of your question. So I was a lawyer in Silicon Valley, and I represented venture-backed companies and investment banks like Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and et cetera. And so I got to
Yahoo,
see how
right, the early Yahoo.
Yeah. So I was fortunate to be at the right place at the right time. And the first board meeting I ever went to was a little company with 3 employees in an office that was across from a Jiffy Lube, and that company was Yahoo. And
amazing.
And so yeah, it was an amazing experience to get started, right at the sort of beginning in the mid 90s of the internet as a commercial endeavor, and so, but I got to see, I got to sort of juxtapose my experience growing up in a small business that's like most of the 30 million small businesses in the United States, and then juxtapose that with these startups that were built from the very beginning with a vision of being massive businesses. Now, most of them didn't become massive businesses, but many did. And so they were scaffolded and blueprinted, et cetera, and architected in terms of their corporate governance and their corporate structures and their financial structures and their advisory structures were architected for scale. And lawyers are a big part of that. And the mentors I had, Larry Sonsini and Craig Johnson, and folks that are legends as far as tech lawyers now, really showed me, wow, there's a gigantic gap between the kind of legal help that a Yahoo or a Google gets and has access to, and your 30 million small businesses. And so when the time came, and as I thought about that, Bob, I thought, wow, with technology we can bridge that gap, and we can deliver something that can make legal services affordable and simple enough, but with the real first thing being affordable enough for small businesses to be able to have that constant day-to-day access to great legal advice that rich folks and big companies have. And that was the idea behind Rocket Lawyer. That's still our mission. That's still what we're after. And I'm still just as excited to keep working on that problem.
Yeah, and that was in 2008. You weren't. I mean, well, LegalZoom existed already. Did you see yourself as different or an alternative to LegalZoom, or there were a couple of other fledgling companies in that vein as well at that time?
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about them that much, to be honest. And really, to be honest, still don't. I think time, the way it's played out, we've grown a lot, and we've grown a lot this year, and LegalZoom has grown as well, and we're different, and that's just played out. I think the biggest factor here is the one we actually started talking about, which is people just desperately need a better user interface into justice and the tools of justice, and they just do. And that's the basic stuff: documents and attorney advice and things you have to file with the government, and all that stuff. That's justice for people, and they need a better user interface into it. And as we have delivered a better user interface, or a modern user interface into these into legal services, the customers have responded, and so that's all we stay focused on. And in reality, the experience that I had working with consumer internet companies was much more valuable to me than anything going on in sort of legal companies at the time.
Yeah. We'll be back to our conversation with Charley Moore in just a moment, but first, let's take a break to hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. Do you struggle with time tracking and invoicing? Bill for Time is an intuitive solution that simplifies time tracking and billing, creating detailed invoices and productivity reports for your law firm. Practice more and manage less with Bill for Time. See it for yourself at billfortime.com. That's Bill, the number 4, time.com. Now let's return to our conversation with Charley Moore. Two things that I think some listeners may not be aware of about Rocket Lawyer. One is that you are an international company. You went into the UK in 2012, and you have branches in France, Germany, and Spain, I think. Is that right?
And the Netherlands.
And the Netherlands, okay. So that's one. And you've grown, as you say, you've grown phenomenally since your founding over the years. The other is, I think a lot of my sense is a lot of people still don't understand that lawyers are that businesses and consumers are getting help from lawyers through Rocket Lawyer. How does that work?
Yeah, well, Rocket Lawyer is founded and based on and commercializes a patented invention, and anybody can go look it up because it's public. But when you say we were started in 2008, sort of invented something and got it patented, and that something was creating legal documentation in the cloud with a document assembly engine. We are never legal forms, and so creating legal documents in the cloud with a document assembly engine, but importantly, with the assistance of attorneys. And so the attorney advice, and at the time there was a lot of unauthorized practice of law cases and things like that going on. And I did see that as an opportunity because we, from day one, and it's in the patent, set out to take advantage of the fact that the internet enabled lawyers and clients to operate on the same network with the same operating system. And we could take advantage of that with a new invention that let them collaborate on their legal matters. And so the most reductive way to say it is when we started, you had do-it-yourself forms that were out there, and you had do-it-for-me lead gen services and things like FindLaw and stuff like that. And I think what we really pioneered was do it with me, lawyers and clients collaborating together and bringing down the cost that way. And that's why it's called Rocket Lawyer,
Right.
because literally from day one, we've been working on that, making that collaboration between lawyers and people who need legal advice more efficient and more effective.
Yeah. So do you find it, I mean, it's interesting, as you said, this year, because of the pandemic, there has been an acceleration of the use of online technologies of all sorts and online legal services. But what we're also seeing this year, and I think the Utah sandbox represents this, is a dramatic change in attitude, at least by some state bar regulators and some state bar associations, towards alternative legal services. I mean, you've had battles with bars over the years. There have been bars that have bar associations that have told lawyers that they should not be participating in Rocket Lawyer. So, what do you think this means for the customers, the audience that you serve? We're at a really kind of a turning point here. Doesn't it seem that way?
Well, I'm so glad you asked the question and stated it that way, Bob. We actually haven't had any battles with regulators. I'm really proud of that. We've had conversations, but in our case, they've lasted a day or two at most. I think what you're referring to is the New Jersey.
New Jersey, yeah.
Yeah, except it took us 24 hours.
Really?
For New Jersey to say that, and I won't name names, but we just have a different model, and it's a model that has actually we've always found ourselves to have vision alignment with regulators and bar associations. When we talk to them, they realize, oh wait, you guys are doing things you're compliant. When New Jersey said, and that's a great example, because when they made their initial remarks about 3 legal services companies, it took us 24 hours to get off that list. And the others, I think, suffered more damage. And so let me tell you why. We don't do attorney advertising. We never have. Lawyers don't pay us anything unless they pay us to use the software like anybody else. And we have thousands of lawyers actually who do buy subscriptions to Rocket Lawyer to use in their practices. And that's always been the case. But other than that, we don't charge lawyers anything. And so that's important. And second, back to that mission, our goal is to bring down the cost of legal help for end users. And as a result of it costing less, they get greater access to justice. And it's interesting because everybody's throwing around this access to justice mission now. Mm-hmm. But many of the business models out there are misaligned to that because those business models the business models of those companies have to do with charging lawyers more and more money. How are the lawyers going to pay more and more money to vendors and software companies other than charging the end user, the client, more and more money. And that's not our model. And so we end up being quite aligned with any regulator who actually says that they want to get citizens greater access to attorney advice. We're really good at that, and we focus on creating a business model that is a virtuous cycle to that end goal of getting consumers access to more affordable attorney advice. We partnered with the American Bar Association. We're currently partnering with the American Bar Association, as an example, and we're currently, engaging with bars around the country, as we engaged with Utah, behind the scenes, no drama, collaboratively to help them think through how best to start to provide a more modern user interface into justice, and as a result to get Utah citizens greater access to lawyering.
Yeah. So why did you want to participate in that sandbox?
We almost never turn down a chance to experiment with people of goodwill who want to address access to justice. And so that's the clearest answer. Whether we are going to do it as part of our, we're doing more community engagement and we have a budget for community engagement. So we've partnered with legal aid as well on different initiatives. We partnered with One Justice here in California. And so first and foremost, we're interested in, more than interested, we're putting our money where our mouth is around access to justice. And so when Utah started a couple of years ago, and the Supreme Court there started thinking about innovating in that area, they came to us, and I being a little long-winded, but I think they came to us because they saw that we had done this already in the UK. And so we were the first company in the UK that a new regulatory body that was created there called the Solicitors Regulatory Authority, the SRA, was created to liberalize and deregulate the practice of law there that had been previously regulated by the Law Society, similar to bar associations here. So long story short, we had done this with the Cameron government. We had worked with them collaboratively, again, and behind the scenes for years. And we'd done a sandbox with them, and it worked. And it's been the law of the land there now for a few years, and we were able to provide data and real life experience with this kind of a model. And I think that was unique, and that's why we originally were approached about Utah. Yeah. So in the UK, we have a dynamic attorney network where some of the attorneys or most of the attorneys are independent firms, just like they are here. And however, some of those attorneys that represent clients under the Rocket Lawyer brand are our employees. And it really works. And our independent attorneys are very happy with that model. They get a lot of benefits from it in terms of our ability to filter and triage matters with our vertically integrated lawyers before some of those matters go to the independent attorneys, and so on. And it's not that that's going to be the model, because we actually started October 1st, so a few days ago, working with clients directly in Utah with our staff, vertically integrated attorneys. And today, as we're speaking, some of the matters are being handled by our internal lawyers, and most of the matters are still being handled in Utah by our attorney network. But what the client gets in this structure is they just get a really delightful experience, and they really love it. We work with a lot of people now at scale, and so every day we get feedback from customers all over the country and in those other countries you mentioned, Bob, and they're delighted. So we're going to share the data with Utah. That's part of the sandbox, just like we did in the UK, and so there's a lot of transparency here, and I'll stop talking for a second.
What might this mean going forward? I mean, I know that you're also, I believe you've also been having conversations with, or at least been following the situation in Arizona. Certainly other states are looking at major, at least exploring major regulatory changes going forward. What do you think this is going to mean for the future of Rocket Lawyer and for the future of how legal services are provided in the United States?
You're talking. I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic for citizens of the United States and people who need legal help in the United States. I think it's going to be one of the, if not the most important change to this industry ever, in a really, really good way. Because we know, for example, at Rocket Lawyer, we know that 2/3 of the folks that use our service have never hired a lawyer before. They've just been, as Richard Susskind, I know you're familiar with Richard, as he
Sure.
has written about a lot. There's a latent demand for legal services out there.
He's been on this show.
Yeah, I'm sure he has. Yeah. And there's a latent demand for legal services out there. He's studied it a lot. And so we're helping to serve that latent demand for legal services. And because we've been in business for over a decade now, that's proven itself out. It's more like Southwest Airlines. Before there was a $49 plane ticket, people took the bus, right, from Dallas to Albuquerque. And then once there was an affordable way to fly, people started flying by the millions, who hadn't really been air travel customers previously. Similar in law, with Rocket Lawyer, we know that these are a lot of our customers, including the small businesses, are actually going from a status of being extra legal, sort of operating their businesses and their lives outside of legal document, outside of the documented sort of legal process, and they've become part of the documented legal process and able to take advantage of it. And then you end up with more cases and controversies, et cetera, because that's what democracy and sort of a democratic society with our form of justice is all about. So I feel really good about that, and I think that the tide has now shifted, and as consumers in Utah and Arizona have access to these services, the dominoes start to fall. And it doesn't look so scary anymore as well, because I think the success, and there will be success in the early adopter states, will sort of show the other states that the boogeyman that everyone was afraid of, just doesn't exist. And the last thing I'll say about it is, one of our principles is, look, the customer gets what the customer wants. And so, protectionism doesn't work over the long term. The customer is going to seek out the services that they want, and they're going to patronize the service they want that's delivered the way that they want it, because it's their money they're spending.
Charley, I know I have to let you go in just a moment, but I did want to ask you about issue of diversity in legal tech. You are a Black CEO in an area where there are very few Black CEOs. There was a study 2 years ago by Kristen Sunday, who's the co-founder of Paladin, a legal tech company, in which she found that there were just 2.3% of founders in legal tech were Black. That was 2 years ago, and I know she's updating her numbers, but I don't think it's changed significantly. And given that you've been involved in the tech scene, the legal tech scene as well for a long time, do you have any thoughts or insights on how we change that situation, how we bring more founders of color into this area and women as well?
Thank you for asking about that, Bob, and thank you for caring about it. I think that's the beginning, is caring about it, and then thinking about it, and then taking action. That's also something that we do at Rocket Lawyer, and care, think, and act. And so along those lines, I can only speak for myself and our organization, and I would encourage people to care enough to ask. And so you didn't ask this question, but I'm going to answer it, which is, we are 43% women at Rocket Lawyer. This year in our hiring has been 45% women. Our board of directors is a majority women and people of color at Rocket Lawyer. And where we have work to do, while we are very diverse, and I'm the founder, in our technology department, African Americans are a very small part of our product development team, less than 5%. And then that goes to the next part of my answer. So my first answer is to be transparent, and to ask, and then to be transparent. Because that will show, you talked on macro numbers, but I think in terms of the legal tech companies that are funded, or the legal tech companies that people work with, if you care, ask. And I'm not saying to be punitive, I'm saying to be collaborative. And so then the second part is, okay, what do we do about it? And certainly, what we're looking at are things like code academies, using our intern program, which this summer, our intern program was majority women, and it was about 50-50, people of color in that program, because we're really, working to address some of this inequity, and to leave the world and our little slice of the world better than where we found it. And so if we can build this company as a diverse organization, then I think that'll make a dent in that overall figure that you put out. But I appreciate the care.
Yeah. Well, and do you think that there's a responsibility at all on the investment community in technology? On an earlier episode of this show, I interviewed James Jones, who's a founder of a company called Court Buddy, which he's since sold. But he, again, was a Black CEO who said that he encountered outright discrimination from some of the investors he met with. Do investors need to be more aggressively, looking at and exploring businesses that are owned by women and people of color than they do now?
No doubt, and there is outright bias in many industries. There's certainly bias in the Silicon Valley investor, and I think most of it is unconscious bias, and I've talked a lot about that since George Floyd was murdered. Have been asked about it a lot since George Floyd was murdered, and we don't want to let his martyrdom, go for naught. And so, squarely, I think the first step is admitting that there is bias in our industry, and that a lot of it is unconscious bias. And people like Jennifer Eberhard at Stanford have written about that. There are ways to address it and overcome it that I think folks should be investing in their organizations. And then lastly, measurement. And the elephant in the room is, where do those institutional investors get their capital? And they get their capital from university endowments. They get their capital from pension funds, from school teachers and bus drivers and first responders, pension funds, and et cetera. And I think there is a moral duty for those who are the stewards of those people's money to care and ask and identify whether that money is going to institutions that are doing something about bias or not.
Charley, I know I've kept you longer than I promised I would. Any final words before we wrap up today?
Just again, super fun to talk to you, Bob, and thanks for doing what you do, for getting these narratives out there. It's an honor for me. It's been a privilege to watch your career, and we're contemporaries, have been on this journey together. So, thanks for everything, and keep doing it. It's fantastic.
Well, thanks a lot. I really appreciate that. Thanks for doing this, and hope you and your company and your family and everybody else stay well and healthy, and very much looking forward to following what happens with the Utah experiment.
Awesome.
That does it for today's show. Thanks again to Charley Moore for taking the time out of his busy schedule to be with us. Thanks to Ben Ambrogi and his company, Populous Radio, for producing and editing today's show. And thanks to all of you for listening. Until next time, this is Bob Ambrogi.